Welcome to today's episode. I'm thrilled to introduce my best friend, Kynze Lundeen. Kynze is a true Jesus lover who has experienced the transformative power of his redemptive love after returning to faith from years of chasing the things of this world. Join us as we dive into a heartfelt conversation about what it means to turn back to Jesus, the struggles of pursuing worldly desires versus eternal treasures, and the beauty of his everlasting forgiveness. Hey friend, welcome to the Between the Pages podcast, where we explore navigating life's peaks and valleys with bold faith. Join us bi-weekly as we dive into meaningful conversations with guests, team members, and community leaders. Together we'll tackle topics that challenge and encourage, helping you live out your faith between the pages of everyday life. Well, hey friends, welcome back to the Between the Pages podcast. I am so excited because it is a special episode that I get to welcome my best friend, Kynze, to the podcast, finally, after 2 years of all the Jesus conversations that we've had over a cup of coffee or tea or anything. So welcome, Kynze.
Or anything, yes.
Or anything.
Thank you. I'm glad to finally be on.
Yes. Well, friends, we are covering a lot of things in this episode, and I'm so excited to learn along with you of Kynze's faith journey, how she grew up, was in the church, fell away, came back, all the things. And so buckle in, grab that cup of coffee, a notebook, your best friend. You can listen to this episode with us, and we're just going to jump right in, okay?
All right.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Well, so Kynze, to kind of give us an overview, tell us a little bit about yourself, like what you're doing now, and then just kind of jump into, that first initial phases of you being a part of the church.
Okay. Well, I'm Kynze, as Rebecca mentioned. Currently right now, I am the vice president of Lundeen Productions. So my background is event production, anything from large events, expos, festivals, concerts. We also do marketing, and then I'm partner of a tent rental company that gets to do a bunch of big events too. So
And bouncy houses.
And bouncy houses.
You can't forget that.
So much fun. You would not think how much fun a bounce house is in your late 20s, but it's a blast.
You get to relive your childhood every day you go to work.
I do. I love it.
Which is so great.
And our staff gets to too. It's so nice coming into work and just seeing happy people, and I don't know, just showed up one day and people are jumping around and I'm like, you're kind of working at the same time. But yeah, that's a little bit about my work background. I'm grateful that I get to do what I do every day. And yeah, so there's that.
You have a dog.
Oh yeah, sorry.
The love of
I have
your
a dog.
life. Sorry, Eric, but
yeah, I kind of forgot about that. I have a dog. His name is Apollo. He is a German Shepherd, Alaskan Malamute, Husky, Gray Wolf.
Anything else? Part lab, part poodle?
No, just those 4 things. So he has an attitude just like his mom. He's very talkative, just like his mom. But he's a very good dog and good companion. And speaking of companions, my fiance Eric.
Is it weird to say fiance now?
It's very weird to say fiance. But yeah,
what has it been, like 2 months?
It's been about a month and a half.
Wow.
Maybe just a month. Time's flying, Rebecca.
Time is flying. That is wild. Wild.
It's really wild, but I'm very grateful that I have him because Lord knows 2 years ago, Kynze would have never had a guy this wonderful. So
yeah,
which you'll hear more about shortly.
Yeah. We're gonna dive into. We gotta shout out Eric.
Yeah.
But we'll hear that. And so all of these, where you're at now, career wise, I know has played a really big role in your faith journey. But let's kind of go back to early elementary school, middle school, Kynze. What was kind of your faith at that point? Let's kind of we'll take it that exploration wise. We'll work our way to where you are now.
Yeah. So when I was much younger, we'll start with our baptism. I was baptized Methodist, kind of my mom's religion growing up, and then I don't know, when you're young, you kind of just follow what your parents do and do what you're told when it comes to religion, I feel like. So I don't really remember going to church much when I was younger. But my dad would take me to Lutheran church as we were getting older.
Mm-hmm.
So him and I would go every Sunday, and I decided to get confirmed Lutheran, and then I wasn't. But I can dive into that story too when we're ready. But
Yeah. I guess how was it in, I think there's a lot of our listeners that are maybe balancing this whole, they might not have gone off to college yet, and that's a whole different story of finding your own way. Like this is the first time you are on your own. You're fending for yourself in this world. But like, how was it for you? Your mom like bringing kind of more of that Methodist, and your dad more Lutheran and baptized Methodist and confirmed Lutheran, and trying to find your way, but having those voices of like influence within your life. Like, how was that like with balancing those two things?
honestly, like it didn't really exist. And I know that's weird to say, but like while we may have been baptized into faith, like we didn't follow it. Like
Okay.
it wasn't talked about really growing up. Like it may have been used in toxic ways, like God's watching, or like if we were doing something like acting up or fighting as siblings, but it wasn't really something that was not forced upon us, but it wasn't really talked about. You were just like, you were Methodist, and that's what it was.
Like this
you
is your label.
Yeah,
Like,
this is your label. That's literally what it was, and that's the sad thing. Like we never really grew up with faith. We didn't grow up. I have never read the Bible fully. I didn't know what my favorite Bible verse was. Like it wasn't. I found my faith myself. I didn't have anyone to really help me through it, which is unique.
Yeah. And
So-
I think like, I know we've had a lot of conversations around that, like, just in like when we hang out, and I'm excited for our listeners to kind of like, we're sitting at a coffee shop, like talking about this, or like in your apartment, like over a game of sequence.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like is that how it usually happens.
Yep.
But, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the way that you were kind of brought up was a little bit maybe untraditional.
Yeah.
If you think of in the terms of like how someone maybe grew up in the faith.
Mm-hmm.
And could you kind of like lean into like what was that untraditional kind of sense? Like, it not really being present, but kind of present. But then, you're getting now into middle school, high school, where you're being introduced to popularity, maybe not so great things like those worldly, secular labels things. Boys are now becoming a thing, maybe not the brightest decision. So
Yeah.
where's a middle school, high school Kynze right now?
She's very lost.
Very lost.
We had like a kind of a difficult childhood, if you will. I get so emotional talking about it, but we really didn't have any guidance when it came to faith. Like my parents were divorced growing up, so that definitely had its challenges. I was more with my mom. My brothers were more with my dad. So like for me, again, like faith wasn't something that you had time for. And that is so hard to say, because it's like now I'm like older and I know that you have to make time for it. You need to. It's good. But I'd be at my mom's house and I'd drive an hour to school, drive an hour back to her house. And I really rebelled, to be completely honest. Like when I was at my dad's house, I'd tell him I was going to my best friend Taylor's house, and that's not where I was going. I was going to hang out with boys, and I was going to be completely honest, go drink with my friends. Yeah. Because that was my like way out, I guess. That
was like your escape from like you being lost. Like lost Kynze was just searching for something that was going to fulfill her. Yeah. And like sustain that happiness.
It was a quick and easy fix.
Yeah.
It made me forget about all the horrible stuff that we had to go through growing up. And I don't blame my parents. I don't blame anyone that like made childhood difficult for us. But like I definitely took a more negative route growing up to kind of fix the things that I'd never been fulfilled with, like faith. So then I decided like maybe going back to church would be a good thing for me. So my dad and I would go to Lutheran service every Sunday. And I decided to become confirmed, which I'm not anymore, but I, went through the classes and my dad was there with me every step of the way. But it felt like I had something to kind of support me through the times that I was going through. And then it didn't. So long story short, when you become confirmed in the Lutheran church, it's kind of different actually, because I was the only one that was confirmed that day. It was literally me in my confirmation class. And the pastor sat me down about a week before the service and he's like, "Tell me about yourself." And I was like, how much time do we have, sir?
Right.
Like, there's a lot to
How deep do we want to go?
Yeah, a lot to dive into. And so I kind of told him about, my family and my parents being divorced and just some of the things that had happened growing up. And he literally took everything I told him and made it into a sermon.
Wow.
Yeah. And I sat front row with my parents, and I had to sit through him talking about like how evil divorce is and like no context whatsoever. Yes, divorce is never really a good thing, but there is no context as to why it happened and like the decisions that led to that. And so I had to go up in front of the church and lead the Lord's Prayer and say my favorite Bible verse. And I just remember absolutely breaking down. And I was like, God would not do this to me. Like, I feel like I would have never been, sorry, again, crying, never be put in a place where, like, I should question my faith. Because I felt like this is not what God would have done, or like not something that I would expect someone who leads a church service to do to me or do to my family, let alone. So my first day confirmed in the Lutheran church was my last. And then after that, I just completely lost touch of my faith. So that's kind of middle school Kynze's little bit of journey there.
Like it was kind of like you were realizing that, there is some sort of anchor in faith in that relationship with the Lord. But in that instance, you were like, it was a very much negative, I would say, not like presentation or face of like faith, but it was a very like, not very positive introduction to like, hey, this is a relationship with Jesus. Like, let's go through your laundry list of things that you just told me. And now let me just kind of preach at you. And so now it's like, do you think that was the point that maybe pushed you further away from the faith, or you were kind of just still back to where you were of this lost Kynze?
It pushed me further away because it's like when you're young and you make mistakes and decisions that you shouldn't be making, I think it's because you're frankly young and dumb. You don't know better. You know what I mean? Definitely those who haven't experienced faith before. So there was that Kynze, and then even more rebellious Kynze because she was so upset with the church. And I kept saying, why, God? Why would you do this to me? And it's like, it's not God doing that to you. It's someone, unfortunately, who's supposed to be speaking the word of God. Which made it 10 times more difficult because I thought, that's who I was supposed to confide in. And
there's a lot of trust broken with that. It's like if you were to talk with a friend and then they like say your deepest, darkest secrets and they go tell all of their friends like that, there's so much trust broken within that. Like, how do you recover from it?
And it was so embarrassing too, because it's like some of the things I said to him, I don't think my parents had realized yet, like how much divorce had affected us. And there's obviously a lot other stuff that had happened when we were younger that we don't need to dive into today because there's still some things people don't even know. But just to take that and to tell everyone. And then my parents are like, why are you telling people this? Like, why would you say that? Like, it's like, I didn't say it in the context he's given it in. Like, so it was just really difficult to not only navigate the feelings that I had inside the church, but like how that affected my family too. Because it's not, you never want someone to bring up the mistakes that you've made in your life.
Right.
Especially in front of a group of people.
Well, and it puts you also in that awkward position because now your relationship with your family is like weird now because it's like, like you said, why are you telling all these people? And it's like, well, you asked me a question and I just truthfully answered the question.
Yeah.
And full confidence that it was going to be taken in that like real raw conversation and not used publicly.
Right.
And so now that kind of like experience happened wasn't the most positive. We have lost Kynze is now further from lost. Rebellious, just not wanting anything to do with Jesus, faith, probably really hard to trust people. In this, that kind of like couple years, what was like that very lost? You said like rebellious, boys were now in the picture. Like, what were kind of those things that, you take as like things that you were chasing of the world? Like those things that were like, it's not faith. It's like, like you said, drinking with friends, boys, what were kind of those things in that situation that you were like, I'm going to chase all these things to fulfill me?
Yeah, I would definitely lie to my parents about where I was going. I would go out and drink with my friends. I think we were like the one group in high school that was the drinking crowd.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily something I was proud of, but like I said, it was my escape. It's what I thought was fine. Like I'd go and hang out with my friends and we'd have, a backyard bonfire. We were always safe. Like we were never driving or super overindulging. But it just, again, it was my escape. My parents think I'm at my friend Taylor's house, and her family was very, close to their religion too. And that's not at all where I was. And I still feel bad to this day. But yeah, I was chasing boys, chasing booze, chasing anything that would make me not think about what's going on at home or what's going on with my little sister, whatever it may have been at the time. Because I'm a fixer. I like to fix things. Like I see a problem. If someone comes up and complains to me about something, I feel like they need me to help them fix the problem.
Like that's what they're asking you to do.
Yes. I really struggle to listen because I am a problem solver. I'm like, let's get to a solution. Like we have no problems. We only have solutions. Like how can we fix whatever's going on? So I felt like I had to be that person in my family too. Like I mentioned, like my brothers were mostly with my dad. I was mostly with my mom. And it was just like the situation was very toxic. So I feel like I had to hold on a lot of stuff on my shoulders that no kid my age should ever have to, while navigating the hormones that women, go through when they're in high school. And, what are you doing after high school? Like, are you going to college?
Like just normal high school drama. Like
exactly.
Beyond just all the other extra stuff. Like, I mean, there's the gossip, the like just friendship drama, relationship drama, like the stress of homework.
I loved drama because it was like an escape from my family drama.
It was escape from reality.
Yeah, it really was. Like I was not very nice. Like I definitely pushed people away, but like I felt like I had to have these insane walls up because anyone that came in would see me and see my family and see my life and be like, I want nothing to do with this. Like I did not think I was worthy of good friends. I didn't think I was worthy of love. Like I was a mess. And it frankly like lost a lot of friends over it, which definitely sucks when you're in high school and you have one friend and, but yeah.
Was there anyone in high school, you're chasing after all these worldly things. And was there anyone like in maybe looking back now that was kind of like trying to like reach you in the sense of like, hey, like I know someone who is going to fill your cup and who like knows your worth and is always like screaming like you are a child of God, like you are worthy, you are loved, you are beautiful. Like, did you have anyone like that in high school maybe that you realized then or looking back realize now that you're like that one person was a little bit kind of pushing me towards back to faith, but maybe that didn't come to fruition in that moment?
Yeah, it's sad that I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head right now. Like our choir director knew our family very well, and he always would like ask like, are you okay? Like, how's life? Like, what's going on? And other than that, not really. I mean, my best friend was always there for me at the time, Taylor. But again, I didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted to go do things that made me not think about that stuff. But no, I didn't really have any like guidance definitely towards faith. I didn't have that at all. You'd get the occasional, you want to go to church on Sunday. And I was like, no, I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with faith. I think it's all ridiculous. It makes no sense. Like, yeah, I just didn't really have that. So I had to kind of figure it out for myself what I needed to be strong, what I thought was the right way to do things, which was definitely not the right way to do things, being toxic and lashing out. And yeah, sadly.
And so all these things, like, we're in like probably a good chunk of years in this like very distant, lost Kynze world that is just searching for something that is fulfilling, something that is like this eternal thing that you can hold on to, that there's this everlasting hope and unfailing love that you're not finding in, your friends or relationships or alcohol or the lying and, the drama and the gossip. as you're kind of now heading into college, and like we had mentioned a little bit earlier, like, you're underneath your parents, like your parents are your influence when you're kind of in that like K through 12, but you're off to college now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're kind of doing things a little bit more on your own, a little bit more independently. What was kind of college Kynze like? Because I know there was a little bit, like we start getting into a little bit more of the like bulk of like starting to kind of see maybe a little bit more of like, okay, this is not the way to go.
Yeah.
Like something needs to change, and what that is, I don't know, but we're figuring it out.
Mm-hmm. College Kynze was a wild child. I'm not afraid to admit that. Had a lot of fun, did a lot of things, but I don't know how to explain it other than I knew where I needed to be.
Mhm.
I just didn't want to get there. Like,
Got it.
knew I always wanted to be a wife. I wanted to be a mom. Like, that was my first and foremost thing. And it
Mhm.
wasn't a faith reason. That's just what I wanted to do. And that didn't work out. I was chasing toxic relationships and, getting my heart broken time and time again. And I was like, all right, maybe the wife and mom path isn't the way for me. So I became an absolute career woman.
Mhm.
I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I want to be. And I know I'm good at it. Like, I can walk into a room.
There's a tangible result.
Yeah. And
from
I
your
can,
hard work.
Exactly. I can walk into a room and I make people listen to me.
Mhm.
I don't let people belittle me. I don't let a man or a strong woman tell me I can or cannot do something. I was like, this is the way it is, and that's just who I'm going to be. And I worked my butt off. I literally, I worked for my dad for his business. I got another job at Arthur's Formal Wear, and then I worked at Viewcrest Nursing Home because I wanted jobs that weren't always connected to my dad. I wanted to make a name for myself,
Mhm.
which is where a lot of the toxic comes in. I found an undying passion for politics, which would make sense with all the things I was passionate about in high school.
Yeah.
Drama, drinking, just making bad decisions. So before that, I went to Lake Superior College.
Mhm.
Went there for 2 years, got, my associate's degree, went to UMD, made friends with the college Republicans. Did that for a year, had a ton of fun with them, did a lot of volunteering, learned a lot more about myself and my career path, not my
Mhm.
faith yet. And then a year later, they asked me to run for president. So I became president of the college Republicans at UMD. And I was like, just thirsty and hungry for success. Like,
Mhm.
I'm like, this is going to be the biggest club in Minnesota. Like, we're going all out to like
Yeah.
make sure that we're known. Like, I wanted to be known. I wanted to be something.
Because you spent this like, it's interesting that you say that, because
Yeah.
you look at, that perspective of high school Kynze who is like
Mhm.
so lost, and you're like, okay, now college Kynze is like, you're not really lost. Like, you've kind of found like
Mhm.
this is my way. Like, this is my route that I'm going. Nothing's going to stop me. But you're now craving this like power, being well known, well liked,
Mhm.
success, which is like so great. That's all good
Yeah.
things. But it's like, in what capacity now,
Mhm.
thinking through like once we get to that faith Kynze of like, are you searching that power and success for you, or are you
Yeah.
searching for that power and success for the Lord?
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting, because I don't think I've ever really connected the dots like that before in our
Mhm.
previous conversations.
Yeah.
So with like, successful businesswoman Kynze that she is, college Republicans were taking this off.
Mhm.
What was that kind of like as far as like, fusing this like searching for something, lost Kynze, to now like,
Mhm.
okay, I found something that is of substance,
Mhm.
and I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah. It was exhilarating. It was like the time of my life because I knew I could do it.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. Like, both of my parents, regardless of whatever in our childhood, were so hardworking. My mom went from absolutely nothing, like rubbing two nickels together, to the American dream, working for a corporation and making a lot of money and becoming stable in her mental health. Like,
Mm.
she always worked hard. Maybe at times it wasn't necessarily what we wanted, how we wanted things to be, but she definitely got to a place where she worked hard. And my dad, being a business owner and raising, 3 kids that were very close in age, like, I was like, wow, I want to be that. them. Like, I want to be hardworking. I want to provide. Like, I don't need someone to help me do that. I can be that. So it was exhilarating because at the end of the first year, we were named Affiliation of the Year Award by the MNGOP. We were the largest club in the state of Minnesota, and we had people calling us from across the country asking us how we did it. And I'm like,
check that box.
Here we go. I'll tell you how we did it. But I also knew, like, politics came with its own challenges. Like, definitely being a part of the Republican Party, like, you definitely get labeled a lot in ways, and I didn't like that. Like, I was the president when Trump was first running, and I was, people are always yelling, build the wall or, whatever. And I'm like, if you're going to say that, like, you better have a good explanation as to why you want that wall built, because you're not going to be this person that looks like a horrible person because they're just saying what the cool thing is right now. Like, I worked very hard to make sure that the club and our people in the club were decent human beings. And anytime anyone went off the wrong path, like, I was like, absolutely not. Either you figure this out, you apologize, or you get the heck out of here. Like, I was a mama Kynze because I, like, loved being the person for people because I didn't necessarily have that. So, like, I loved people coming to me and, like, trusting me and needing me. I needed that. Like, I needed to be needed. Like,
you wanted to be the person that you always wanted but never had.
Exactly.
And, like, you were like, if I don't have that in my life, I want to be that for someone else that might have that. Which I think college Kynze is kind of like seeing these are good values to have. And, like, I think is, like, an interesting way that the Lord can kind of take people's, like, story of their life and, like, place small things that's like, okay, this is gonna suck. Like, I know that this whole confirmation day is not what you thought it was gonna be, and it's gonna push you further away. But, like, now you can kind of see these building blocks of, like, your parents were hardworking and they're instilling in you a value of, like, hard work and dedication and looking out for people. And now, like, college Kynze's being like, I want to be there for other people and I want to serve other people in a way that I can and, like, make people better and leave people better than what they were.
Exactly.
And I think that, did you ever think that there was, like, kind of something in that you're like, okay, wait a second. I think we're kind of on something right here where there is that, like, maybe faith isn't all that bad.
Yeah. Well, before that happened, I, like, again, became even more hungry. And I kept wanting more and wanting more and wanting more. Meanwhile, while all this was happening, I was still a full-time student. I was still working for my dad full-time. I was, juggling grades, and then I was juggling my health. My health took a decline the minute I turned 21, and I was in and out of hospitals and racking up medical debt. And again, I was carrying all this on my shoulders. And yes, my parents were supportive, but maybe not in the way that I needed them to be, faith-based, right? And I crashed. I went back to high school Kynze. I burned bridges. I walked away from a lot of things that I shouldn't have walked away from, and I gave up. I literally gave up. And during that time, my friends were like, you should come to Mass with us. You should just come sit at Mass with us. And growing up Lutheran, I was like, absolutely not. I'm not going to a Mass with you. Like, that.
Like, how long is that again?
It's like, how long is that? And Lutherans told me not to go to Catholic Mass. Like, it was just kind of instilled in my brain that Catholics equal bad. So finally I listened to them. I was like, fine, I'll go to Mass with you. Like, whatever, go to Mass. I've literally found what I had been searching for the longest time. And it was Father Mike, giving a homily about being lost. And, where, being this lost college kid and making all these decisions and having to do all these things. And it just really spoke to me. And I was kind of getting over that whole Catholic thing. Like, I went to another Mass and another Mass and another Mass. And it definitely changed the way that I looked at religion. I wasn't necessarily quite sold on it. And then one day I woke up and I was like, this is where I need to be. And then I never, made the move to fully, like, become Catholic or fully get into my faith again because I was still loving college and finishing up college.
You're still now balancing this whole thing of, like, I like this, but I've been trying to fulfill myself with these things.
Yeah.
And I think the bulk of, like, your story is, like, this idea of chasing these worldly things of, power, success, maybe like very toxic relationships, the gossip, the alcohol, all these things that you're trying to like fill yourself up with to like numb the pain.
Yeah.
Versus you're now realizing, there's all these eternal things that I can chase that I'm going to take with me to heaven and rejoice in later.
Yeah.
And you're kind of now in this like balance things of like chasing after worldly things, but also these eternal things have meaning, or these things are very meaningless. What was that like turning point where you're like, this like meaningless worldly things that I'm chasing is not for me. These things are not going to fill my cup.
Yeah.
What was that turning point for you in your faith journey that you're like, I'm chasing after the Lord wholeheartedly because I want to be at the gates at the end of my life and hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant.
Well, I graduated from college, and that helped because I left the things that weren't giving me full joy, or they weren't filling the cup, and they were turning me more away from the Lord than they were bringing me to it. And it was like a random Thursday. It was 2 a.m. actually, and my friend Andrew texted me, and he's like, hey, I texted Father Mike, and you're going to start RCIA, and which means just like the process to becoming Catholic. And I was like, oh, okay.
Sure.
I guess I'm doing this. Like, I was like, was this my sign to like kind of push me towards it? I've always needed a push in things that I've done because I'm a horrible decision maker.
You're stubborn.
I'm very stubborn, very, very stubborn. But I also knew at the time that I remembered how it made me feel when I went to Mass in college. And like I said, I'd finished college, decided to go through RCIA, went to the classes, and I just felt like that's where I needed to be. Father Mike kind of heard my story and didn't judge me for it. He was like, oh, you have divorced parents? I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, welcome to the Catholic Church. I was like, you're not going to say anything else? No. Should I? I was like, well, I don't know. He's like, no, that's not you.
You told me.
Yeah, I was like sitting there. I was like, are you sure I'm allowed here? Like, okay. So, I went through RCIA and learned a lot about myself and faith and, had people there carrying me along the way. I was dating a guy at the time that, we had on and off for forever. And it was one of those things where I was just like, I thought he was the love of my life. I thought that's who I was going to end up with. And I was dating him while I was going through RCIA. And I was just kind of like, I don't know. I was still kind of lost when I was going through RCIA, but I knew that's where I needed to be.
Right.
And I'm probably really confusing. But yeah. So, the day, it was like a week before my confirmation. I was down in the cities visiting him and getting ready for a conference that I was planning. And, Father Mike calls me and he's like, hey, like, you need to get rebaptized because your baptism when you're a Methodist, like the wording was a little bit different than how the Catholic Church does it. So could you come up to Duluth and get that done tomorrow? And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, is this all worth it? Like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, I had to make a decision, like conference or becoming baptized with the Catholic religion.
And that's your first pull of worldly or eternal.
Yeah. Yes.
Like what?
Yeah. It was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing that I needed to push me in the right direction. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? Like, this is like my career and this is my faith, plan. And I came to Duluth. I called my parents on the way up and I literally showed up, got baptized, and drove right back down to the cities. But I knew it's where I needed to be. And I knew it's like, I looked at it and I was like, you've had your career for the past 8 years at this point. You've had your faith for the past maybe year. What's brought you more joy? And I was like, my faith has. 100% has. It's taught me so many different lessons that I'd never even put into perspective. It's grounded me. Like, Catholic faith is like, it's very structured, and I need structure in my life. And I think that's one of the things that drew me most to it was like structure. You have to do this. You have to do that. And I just felt more present being in it. And it just made sense for me. And so anyway, went down to the conference, came back up, got confirmed the next weekend. And I just felt like it's exactly where I needed to be. I didn't question it one bit. I've questioned a lot of things in my life, still do, but I never ever questioned becoming Catholic. But when I did, it helped me open my eyes and realizing what are the other parts of my life that aren't filling the cup.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, the boyfriend at the time did not love me the way I loved him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, like maybe that's not the path for me. And I remember praying so hard. I'm like, God, please bring me someone that's going to be the person for me. It's going to bring me closer to you. It's going to bring me a family someday. It's going to bring me the things that I have prayed for my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always prayed, even when I wasn't religious, but I wasn't praying for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It was just very toxic. And
it was like more like praying to like be like, here's my want list.
Yep.
Like, here's my Christmas list.
Literally, Santa, help out. Like, this is Jesus or whoever you are, help me. Way back then. Now it's actually legitimate praying. But I just had like this weird, I don't know, come to Jesus talk, if you will. That was like, you need to leave this relationship, even though it's going to probably kill you.
It was us in the parking lot at that church.
It was us in a parking lot at a church. And I was like, I did not want to, but I knew I needed to.
Mm.
And I did.
Do you feel like that was your last, like me connecting all these dots? Because at this point now, we started becoming friends because I remember these conversations. Do you feel like that was your last, like, thinking of all these like meaningless things in the world? Like, do you feel like that was your last thing that you just had to like let go?
Yeah.
To then fully chase after Jesus and be like, okay, this is the one thing that's holding me back to this, like, I always go back to the saying in the Bible where it's like we're in the world, but we're not of the world.
Yes.
Like we are in here, we're called to a purpose, we're called to mission, we're called to like share the love of Jesus, but we're not of the world. Like we're not of the trends, we're not of the like relationships that aren't built on a solid foundation in Christ. We aren't meant to be in this world of, getting drunk every single weekend or, doing all these bad things or talking negatively about people, but we're called to love. Like, do you feel like that was your last, like, God's like, this is the last meaningless thing I need you to let go to fully embrace this eternal perspective that I want you to have in your life?
It was the last major thing that I knew I needed to let go. But like I said, it wasn't meaningless. Like he taught me so much and he showed me what I needed and what I wanted in my life, but just he couldn't be that for me. And so when I walked away from that, I kind of went back to old Kynze and looked for the next best thing. And I met someone else. You were there for me through all this. And we dated for maybe a month. And I remember him and I sitting in my apartment. And I kid you not, I told him, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm sorry, I cannot be in a relationship with you. And he's like, why? And I was like, that's a great question. I said, I need to be with someone who is of faith. Like, I want to be someone who's Catholic. I want to be with someone who shares the same religious beliefs as me. Like, that's what I need and that's what I want. And I know that's what's meant for me. And he literally told me, he's like, I think your religion is like being in a river without a life jacket. And I'm like, what? First, I thought that didn't really make a ton of sense, but like.
Good trying the metaphor.
Yeah, I was like, I literally looked at him and was like, excuse me? And he's like trying to tell me that like being, like following your faith doesn't make sense because you're not going anywhere after this life. And he had told me that multiple times. I'm like, well, I know where you're going, and it's out of my apartment because I never want to see you again. Like, you're not going to sit here after I've just had the spiritual battle of my life the past 2 years and tell me that my religion is like wearing a life jacket.
Imagine like Jesus. I imagine him just having a personality, be like clapping his little hands, like, "Yeah, you did it! Like, good job!" Like
that poor man. He saw me so mad. I was just like, "Get out! I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you." Like he left, and then he wanted to talk more about why we broke up, and I was like, "Okay, writing's on the wall. Like why we're not together." And there was multiple times when like he like wanted to be back together and like no, but even after like him and I broke up, the guy before him that him and I dated for 2 years, I went running back to him immediately because I'm like, I need to feel needed. It's going back to that Mama Kynze thing, like I want people to need me and want me. And finally I just threw my hands up. Like I'm done. I'm done chasing things that aren't meant for me. I'm done trying to be in places where I'm not welcome. That's just not for me. It's really not. And I booked a one-way ticket to Washington, D.C. just to get out of here and just find myself, like not find myself, but like kind of like, I don't know.
Just like take a step back and evaluate, because I also think too, like, you know, it's one of those things like when you're like, I just had to throw my hands up. You're like, God, I need you, and I'm crying out to you to fulfill me and sustain me.
Yep.
And, you know, you do that one way to Washington, D.C., you come back, and, like, I remember, like, I wouldn't say you were a totally different person, but I think there was a little bit of a different, like, shift in perspective on life. And I think maybe it was the whole, like, oh, there's nothing that's after this life. Like, there's no end. Like, you're just done. But I think, like, you know, you have that eternal perspective of, like, there is something after this life, and it's so much better than this world.
Yeah.
And I want a partner, and I want a best friend and a community around me that is going to run that race the same way, where we can, like, be running as fast as we can. We look to both sides of us, and, like, we know where we're going.
Yeah.
And that's, like, we're going to be hanging out with Jesus in heaven one day. Kind of in all of this, like, there's a lot that you've gone through. Taking this whole, like, comparison of chasing the things of this world to, like, chasing these eternal things, chasing that faith, chasing after Jesus. What did that whole, like, chasing after eternal things look like for you? And now this different, like, I'm leaving these things behind. Maybe not fully, like, there's always going to be some parts of life that you're going to have to, like, kind of come to terms with, but you have this direction of, you know, I'm becoming Catholic. I'm going to be very intentional with my faith. Like, what did that look like for you in this focus of chasing after those eternal things?
I just became at peace with who I was. And I'm like, it's okay that you were like that. I still get so emotional thinking about it, but and like you said, when I got back from DC, it was just like, it's this totally different person. Like I said, I was totally at peace with who I was, the decisions I've made, the people that I had, you know, spent my time with. And I was like, at the end of the day, like, none of this matters. None of the boys don't matter. The childhood doesn't matter. Like, what matters is my relationship with Jesus and where I'm going after this. And I just remember, like, just being at peace with everything. And you told me, like, well done, my good and faithful servant. And maybe that wasn't at the time, but I look back now and I'm like, that's what I want to hear when I leave this earth. And that's what I want my friends and my family to hear when they leave this earth. Like, they lived a life knowing that that's what Jesus would have wanted for them. They were worthy of heaven's gates. And that's what I want to be too. Like, I definitely, like, struggle when I think about my past self because I get so mad that I let myself do those things. But because I changed, I met Eric. And because I changed, I'm getting married to the love of my life. And I get to have the things that I prayed so hard for. Sorry. And I get to raise kids someday in a different way than I was raised. And that's what means more to me, is just being at peace, knowing that what I've done is okay and God forgives me. And I can teach people and show people that you can be lower than rock bottom and you can still be worthy of God again because of the decisions you've made past that point. So.
And you literally just, like, gave me chills because it's a beautiful, like, this full, like, well-rounded story that you have, which I am so excited for our listeners and viewers to just digest this because, you know, they're, like, realizing that they're not alone. Like, someone else has gone through this too, like, a rough childhood, feeling lost, like, maybe even had a rough, you know, instance with the church and like having this negative kind of perspective of church to begin with to moving towards chasing a lot of these like very temporary things. Like I always go back to, in the Bible, like the things of this world are so temporary. Like
Mhm.
everything will just disappear.
Mhm.
And I always remember I wrote a blog post and I was like, if everything if I'm sitting in my room alone and if everything was to just vanish, what's going to still be around? Myself, Jesus, and the Bible.
Right.
These things that have this eternal, everlasting, life
Mhm.
that we get to take this with us beyond this world. And now you're kind of in this healing, restoration, forgiveness kind of journey on, and like coming to this reflection of even accepting Jesus' forgiveness, like him being like, it's okay.
Mhm.
I forgive you. You are clean. Like you are like it's like, the bride in his church. Like we're all brides.
Mhm.
Like, and like preparing for that wedding day, preparing for that day that we get to be at that gate. And
Mhm.
I think for you, like how have you kind of, maybe even today, like
Mhm.
like on that ongoing journey of healing, restoration, and just like accepting Jesus' forgiveness. Like, where are you at kind of with that now? Like, I feel like, you've been with Eric for 2 years,
Yeah.
2 years. So, like, you guys have probably like worked through this. Like, you've worked through this now being a part of the
Mhm.
Catholic Church for a couple years, having a little bit more of that like stable faith community around you that's uplifting and providing that support that you need. Like, where are you at kind of now with that healing journey, that forgiveness, that continued restoration that you're going through? Because, I mean, I think we all continue to go through those
Oh,
things.
yeah. We do. I just honestly try to make sure that I'm still on the path of where I wanna be at all points. And I definitely recognize, like, where I am now, where I wanna be, and now I use what I've learned, what I've been through, and where I am now to help those around me. Um, I was so excited last year, my coworker actually, Josh, he asked me to be a sponsor for when he became Catholic. And so I feel like I'm using, you know, what I've learned and my connections with God to bring other people to their faith and to recognize the decisions that they want to change or the things that they want to change and just being there for others. And I think too of how I stay on the path, even with Eric, is that's what I love about Catholics is confession. And I know it's a topic not for most people, but
Yeah,
for me, it's like I get to go to confession and tell God the things that I've been struggling with and the things that I've done that have kind of pushed me away from the church again and just give it all to the Lord. And the priests are, someone used the example, the priests are God's garbage trucks. You give all of your sin, all of your confessions, to the priest, and then boom, they're gone. You're forgiven again. You're reminded that you're worthy of God's love no matter what.
mhm,
Um, so I think that's helped me a lot in keeping me on the path to, where I want to be and where I want Eric and I's future family to be and where I want my friends to be, regardless of if they're Catholic or not. I just want them to know that they're loved by Jesus, regardless of what their faith may be.
for sure. And I want to read this excerpt here and kind of wrapping up with, I know that this is one of our longer episodes because there's so much packed into this and it's all good. And I want us to kind of just quickly, from this excerpt, my brother wrote this on the blog a couple years ago about, Ecclesiastes 1, 2 through 7, which talks a lot about what we've talked about, the earthly things versus having that eternal perspective. And as I'm like glancing at this right now, I'm like, wow, this is literally Kynze's story in a blog 2 years apart, which is wild how Jesus works like that. Um, but to kind of give it some support in a biblical standpoint too of your story and everything. Ecclesiastes 1, 2 through 7 says, "Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does man gain from all of his labor at which he toils under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. And he goes on to say, the teacher is asking what everyone has asked themselves at some point. What is the meaning of all this? My life, this world, these things. What purpose could it have when it seems so temporary? After all, the teacher says in chapter 3, he has also set eternity in our hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Eternity is daunting for all of us because, like God, it is impossible for us to fully comprehend it. I'd even venture to say that it is because of God's incomprehensible nature that eternity is incomprehensible. Since it is itself a characteristic of God, He is eternal. He sees things from an eternal perspective, one that acknowledges all that is past and all that will be to the end of the days. And he goes on to say, what does all of this mean? What does this eternal perspective even mean? And it comes down to just the gospel. And for your story, your story is so much of the gospel. You can be so lost. And Jesus is like, I'm going to chase after you no matter how many years it takes, and you will be found. And he goes on to say, at the beginning of eternity, God created everything, including us. We are in a perfect relationship with him, but then we rebelled against him in pride. We were cast out of the garden, and now we live in the world that Ecclesiastes describes, a world where nothing fulfills, nothing satisfies, nothing has meaning. God never left us, though. He sent his son Jesus to die on the cross, to be the righteous sacrifice that restores our relationship with God. So long as we believe in Jesus' death and resurrection and choose to follow him, there will be a day when Jesus returns again in all glory and majesty, when everyone will sit in front of the judgment seat of Christ, when those who have chosen to re-enter relationship with him will enter into a perfect eternal kingdom with him, and the rest will be separated from the goodness of God forever. And when time will once again be meaningless and everything else will once again have meaning. That's it. That is the eternal perspective. The story of the gospel is a story of eternity, and we as Christians are to live a life in light of these truths. We know where it started, and we know where it's going. I don't know about you, but I look around at this world we live in, and I'm absolutely ready for the eternal one, where the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. This year, I have felt the pull of eternity more and more, longing to have it come already. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
How perfect is that for our conversation and your story of how you were going through all of this is not fulfilling me. It's not worth it. It doesn't satisfy me. I don't feel full. I actually probably feel more drained.
Yeah.
But what fulfilled you is the fact that, Jesus came, he died, he rose again, and he's like, I'm going to chase after you, and you're going to feel found, and you are found, and you are worthy. Thinking through for our listeners here as we kind of wrap up, what would you say is maybe some advice for that one person? Maybe it's another Kynze out there.
Oh boy.
Who is feeling, distant from their faith, or, it's hard to prioritize that eternal relationship, knowing oh my gosh, just be excited the fact there is eternity. There's something beyond this world. I don't know about you, but I get excited to think about that. Oh my goodness, this is only chapter 1.
Yeah.
Chapters 2 through eternity are still coming. What is that maybe piece of advice for little Kynze out there that is feeling distant or struggling with those worldly things?
Well, don't give up. Lean into the people who want to support you and want to love you. The walls that you have built need to come down, or partially down. And just keep fighting for yourself. There's more to this world than drinking every night and partying and chasing people who don't want you
Mhm.
or don't want to be in your life or don't want you in their corner. Like, just lean into what God wants for you. And that little voice at the back of your head is right. Let it come out. Let yourself live through God and live through your faith. And because I feel like I could have had a better life if I would have recognized that and leaned into that sooner.
Mhm.
So,
Is there anything, scripture-wise for you that you've leaned on to, or like maybe like a passage in the Bible or a daily habit, excuse me, habit that you do, um, that has helped you through, maybe those moments where you might have that little instance of feeling lost still,
mhm.
that you can kind of share with our viewers and listeners as kind of that last take home. Here's an action item for you. Like, here's a physical thing you can go read, or
Mhm.
a physical thing that you can implement to kind of help that process.
Yeah. So for me, it's definitely a little bit more of a Catholic perspective. Father Mike has been just a person that I've leaned on. I give him the credit for making me who I am now because he guided me through everything. But he has a podcast called Bible in a Year,
Mm.
and I try to do it every day, but I just haven't, and I need to. But honestly, listening to him, and it really doesn't make it from a Catholic perspective. Like, I think anyone can really listen to it, but just listening to him go through, each of the verses or chapters and just he reads them and then he
Mhm.
talks about them after, and he brings it into a whole different perspective of maybe you're confused by what was said in the Bible. He like brings it to like a real world standpoint
Mhm.
or whatever, but that's helped me a lot. And praying the rosary. Like, I know when I'm acting up, I need to go lay in my room and pray the rosary. It just helps me become grounded and remind myself, like, this
Mhm.
is why you're doing what you're doing. Like, this is where you need to be. And um, those are personally the things that have helped me. I also do call my friend Rebecca a lot.
Oh,
But I'm going through something too. But honestly, call your friends,
right.
and
Lean into that community that you have, and if
absolutely.
you don't have that positive community, like, speaking
Mhm.
into you, like, find someone who is that
Yeah.
person.
And don't be scared because
Mhm.
for me, like, I'm very new to faith and very new to the Bible. So, like, to be honest, I told Rebecca not to ask me what my favorite Bible verse is because I don't
I've
have
been doing pretty
really,
good so far.
yeah, I really don't have anything memorized now. But even if you're scared or embarrassed, don't be.
Mm.
Ask the questions. Like, I don't think any question's a stupid question.
Stay
Like,
curious.
yeah, here you get to learn more about God the more questions you ask, and that is such a beautiful feeling.
Mhm.
So, yeah, don't be scared because I've definitely been that person where even I walk into a cathedral, I'm like, am I supposed to be here right now? Like, what's adoration? Like, how do you pray the rosary? Like, ask the questions because if you
Right.
don't, you'll never get to lean into your faith. And it's
Mhm.
so beautiful the more and more you get into your faith. It
Yeah.
literally gets better the more you do it.
Well, the thing is, like, ending with this is, like, as you all stay, like, curious, and, like, as even for you, like, being newer to the faith is in myself, like, I've grown up in the church, like,
Mhm.
I'm still learning things, and it's so beautiful, and I think you guys have heard me say this on the podcast before, actually, probably the last episode, is we're never going to fully know everything about God. Like,
Mhm.
He's eternal.
Mhm.
Like, there are so many things about God that we are never going to be able to physically comprehend. But that's, like, the excitement and the joy of asking those questions is, like, that's gonna lead to another question,
Mhm.
and another discovery, and another one, and another one. It's gonna keep going, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be never ending.
Mhm.
And it's like, I just can't wait to sit down with, I don't know if they have, like, coffee in heaven. I'm kind of hoping they do because, wow.
What
But,
cloud
like,
is the
just to,
coffee
like
on? Yeah.
but, like, just to sit down and, like, ask all these questions to, like,
Mhm.
Jesus, or, like, even the biblical characters in the Bible, like, why? Like, I just
Yeah.
wanna understand why, but, like, I also have a million other questions.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, for you guys, Catholic or not, like, we love all those perspectives of,
Mhm.
like, religion, and, like, just to hone in on, getting the word, like, the Bible app from, or the podcast with Father Mike, or
Mhm.
going on to the Bible app or the YouVersion app. There's plenty of, like,
Mhm.
Bible in a year options there. Like, find something that you can connect with,
Yeah.
find a community that you can connect with, friends that you can connect with, and take that time to pray, whether that's the rosary, whether if it's just like talking to the Lord, like as, you're just like, hey, in your car and be like, Jesus, we need to have a moment here.
Mhm.
Like, we got to talk. I do that all the time. I'm like, yo, we have an issue and we are going to sit here and figure it out because I need to get this off my chest. And like, however you connect in your faith or however like you are needing to just recenter on the Lord, like do that.
Mhm.
Like do that, whatever that is. And with that, any last minute pieces of advice, things that you would tell your own children one day who maybe they're lost or they're like, Mom, I don't understand this, or Mom, like, I don't know what to do.
Sometimes you need to make mistakes to know better.
That's a good one.
Like, I would not be here if I didn't fall on my face every other day. Like, I would not be in my faith if I didn't fall on my face every other day. Like, it's okay to make mistakes, but make sure you learn from them.
Yeah.
Every single mistake is a learning opportunity. I even say that at work. Like, yeah, let's recognize the mistake. Okay, let's fix it. You have 30 seconds to be mad. That's my rule of thumb. Like, y'all get 30 seconds, okay? But the next 30 seconds after that, we're problem solving. Because what good does it do being upset or mad or angry or frustrated when on the other side of it, there's happiness, there's solutions, there's this whole idea that you don't need those things anymore. You don't need the anger. You don't need the sadness or the sin or the lust, whatever it may be, like when you could have so much more.
Right.
Stuff that's actually filling your cup.
Yeah, that acceptance, forgiveness, grace. Like, it's okay. And friends, it's okay. It's okay to mess up even when you are walking in a faith journey. You will still make mistakes. You will still learn, and it is all okay. And Kynze, we just want to thank you for just like putting your heart out there for our listeners and our viewers. I think it's so beautiful that we can have these conversations and just like, we're sitting playing sequence right now.
Yes.
And, having those Jesus talks, because the truth is people go through things and you're not alone. And so thank you all for just, sticking with us in this conversation and coming along for that ride of just Kynze's story. And, thank you for just being vulnerable and honest. I know it's a hard thing to do. And
it is.
It's definitely not easy, but, God uses our stories to touch other people. And, friends, we want to be able to hear from you. Like, if there's something that Kynze said today that, really resonated with you, like, send us a DM, comment on our Instagram. I see her literally all the time. Like, I will make sure that she gets your messages, things like that. And yeah, so good. I'm like still comprehending our whole conversation because I'm like, wow, it's so good. But friends, thank you for joining us. We love you. We are always here for you, whether that's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the things. Comment, send us a message, whatever it may be. We want to be there for you. We are there with you in all things life, Jesus, heartfelt conversations, whatever it may be. So we will see you back here in a few weeks. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe and rate our show to stay up to date on our latest episode releases. We'd love to hear from you, so head on over to our website or the gram, say hi, be encouraged, and join the movement as we continue to boldly seek after Jesus together. We'll see you next time on the Between the Pages podcast.